Hi, Mark. How are you doing? Very nice to speak to you.
Nice to talk with you. Where are you at?
I'm originally from the UK, but I actually live in the north of Spain in Bilbao, so I'm
Oh, wow.
quite a long way. Yeah,
You're still across the pond, though, as they
I'm still
say.
across. Yeah. No, I've been in Bilbao for the past 20 odd years. Yeah. So I mean, thanks very much for speaking to me. It's just doing the research for me. I was very nostalgic because I believe you started working at Disney in about 1980, which made me about 4 or 5, which was pretty much when I started kind of really going to the cinema and watching all these movies. So thank you very much for all those memories, first of all.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yes,
Uh-huh.
1980.
1980 was when you started. Oh, yes, I was, yeah, 5. I'd be 5 then, yeah. So, I mean, and also the first film that you were involved in was The Fox and the Hound, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
That would be correct, yes.
So, I mean, but before we get into the kind of Disney, I wanted to talk about something that really stuck out for me from the episode of Sketchbook is the fact that it's a true story of dedication, determination on your part, because you were rejected, was it 3 times before you finally made it to Disney? So could you kind of briefly kind of explain how you got into drawing and how you didn't give up and eventually you got to where you are, and then 41
Yeah.
years later we are talking about it.
Well, it's easier, of course, now at this point in my life and in my career, look back and kind of see how, God's kind of worked out all the puzzle pieces and things kind of fell into place. But I always loved drawing. My
Mm-hmm.
mom, she takes credit for starting me drawing by putting a piece of paper and a pencil in my hand to keep me quiet in church, so that's her claim to fame. But I always drew. I just like to draw, and but yeah, I at a certain point I went through fairly normal, very normal growing up and going to public school and high school, and then I had a year at a public university in Ohio. But it was after my first submission, when I first sent my first portfolio to the studio, and they kind of said, there's something there. We'd like to see some more. This is what we'd like to see. That I started realizing I needed to get a little better art education than what I thought I was going to get at the state university level at that point in time. Wanting, people growing up and saying, I want to be an animator was certainly not the normal career path. Yeah, that most young boys and girls, were endeavoring to coming out of the Midwest in here in the States. But anyway, so through a combination of a desire to get a better art education and looking for some different schools, I ended up at CalArts here in California, which had the specific the Disney program. Before I got there, I had was at a junior college for a year and sent 2 more portfolios 2 different times, so made a total of 3 to the studio, thinking that I had gotten to the level that they were expecting to see in a portfolio, but I obviously didn't. But the ironic thing is that the portfolio that got me into CalArts was largely the portfolio that they rejected. I just kind of retweaked it a little bit, added a few things, and edited it up a little bit. But it was largely that portfolio was what I ended up sending to CalArts, to the Disney animation program. And that's what got me into CalArts. So it's kind of interesting that way.
And I mean, from having drawn all your life to go to CalArts, did you then realize when you got to CalArts what it was that maybe Disney were asking for you that you didn't have prior to this education?
Well, I had a pretty good idea. I mean, at that time, portfolios were largely reflected a person's drawing ability, and that was usually seen through life drawing. So life drawing classes, anatomy, and all of that was a real foundational, fundamental drawing skill that the studio was looking at, that I needed to work on at the time. And then when I got to CalArts, we were continuing to do that. We had all of my instructors at CalArts, save for one, were all former Disney artists that worked at the studio for many, many years, and some of the top artists in their fields. Elmer Plummer was our life drawing teacher. So he had a very unique and a very structured way of teaching life drawing, which, for me was all new. I hadn't really had that kind of instruction, and it was all, centered around, understanding anatomy, as well as how that then translates to, working in this industry in terms of, putting a figure in perspective and all those kind of things. So it was quite the learning experience. And I was with, we had about 30 people in my class at the time, and we all were just very hungry, eager young artists, hoping to get hired at Disney.
Uh-huh. And then once you did get hired at Disney, I mean, you did a few projects, but you very, very quickly made a name for yourself, specifically kind of the heroines, the female characters in the film. Was that something just because you were assigned those films, or was that something you particularly kind of enjoyed drawing those kind of characters?
Well, that's a good question, and I may or may not be the best person to give you an answer for that. It kind of just happened. A lot of people have asked similar kind of questions, and the stories we picked all had a lot of leading ladies. So starting with Ariel, and then going through the next run of films, we had fairly prominent, if not the leading character was a girl, a heroine. So you went from Ariel to Belle to Jasmine to Pocahontas. I mean, they all just kind of started stacking up on each other. But those are the stories. Those were the stories that were chosen, and I didn't have really a hand in picking the stories, but I had the opportunity when I came to the studio to work with Eric Larson, who was my mentor for the first 6 years or so that I was here at the studio before he retired. And he was one of the supervising animators on Cinderella, which was one of the first films that I ever saw when I was a young boy. And I just remember how when I was assigned to Ariel, that I always had Eric in the back of my mind, and just the standard that he set with Cinderella. And I always had hoped that I could achieve, or come close to achieving the same kind of results with Ariel that he did with Cinderella. So that was always in the back of my mind. But the stories we've picked, Mulan, Tiana, I mean, Princess and the Frog, they all had, leading ladies. And I think I've always felt that if you look at the type of characters that I seemingly consistently did across my career, they were usually the leading character. And it just happens that a large percentage of them happen to be young girls. And I don't know, I just, that's kind of a, going back to Snow White, it's kind of a Disney, tradition to have that strong leading lady. And I'm happy to have been, kind of carry that tradition on. So. Yeah,
but I mean, having said that, the actual character that you get to draw, or you get to show how people can draw it, is Simba, no, in this series. And he was kind of like a turning point for you in your career, in the fact that you kind of, most of them had been leading ladies, no? And then you were going to draw, I think, was it Scar originally? And then they said, no, we've had a bit of we changed our mind, and we prefer if you could have a go at the young Simba for us, no?
Yeah, well, you got it. Yeah, well, the thing that was nice about The Lion King at the time, we were at a point in the studio's production schedule to where we had several productions going. And The Lion King initially was kind of the B project, kind of considered the, when I think Pocahontas at the time was in development, was kind of considered the major production. And so Lion King was going to be this kind of smaller picture, and it went through the usual story trials and tribulations that our films often do, and it kind of found itself. And so it was, yeah, like you said, it was an opportunity for me to do something other than a leading lady, which was great. And yes, I initially had an interest in doing Scar, because I hadn't really I've animated a few scenes with villains, but that was never my assignment. And I've always felt strongly that I'd love to do that sometime. And so, yes, Don Hahn, the producer, and his very gentle wisdom took me aside and basically, said that we need you on Simba. Simba's kind of the heart and soul of the whole thing, and it's hard to say no to that. And so I was more than happy to, and we had a great, the story really started to take off, and I had a great voice talent with Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who was excellent, and it just kind of all worked out. And I loved working on Simba. He was a nice change of pace.
And also in this episode, you talk about how there's so much research. I didn't really expect there to be so much research, but there really is a huge amount of research that goes into, especially, for example, Simba. You talked about all the kind of the movements, but not just the movements, but the kind of the environment and everything. But something that you didn't touch on that I was curious is how much work goes into actually working with the voice actor, because oftentimes a lot of the characters do actually they have certain kind of physical aspects that do resemble the voice actor. Is that something that you work quite closely with some of the voice actors over the years?
Well, it depends. Some have a greater influence on the design of the character than others. When I first met Jonathan Taylor Thomas and saw pictures of him, I was a fan of Home Improvement. I watched it regularly, and he, I used to kind of look at him and think, he kind of he reminds me of a lion cub in a lot of ways. He was kind of the embodiment of Simba. He was charming and a bit, naively cocky, for a young lion, young person. And so all those qualities were kind of there with Jonathan. And so I always kind of had him in the back of my mind. He had, the color of his hair, just kind of a little tussle of hair that he had. And, it was a really good match, so it worked out really well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, sadly, we're out of time, Mark, but I really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, to recall some of my childhood memories, and I wish you the best of luck with the series, and I look forward to speaking to you again sometime soon.
Oh, thank you very much. Enjoy your day.
Thanks,
yeah, the same to you.